In this solve-along video, we'll explore how to factor out the greatest common factor in various polynomial expressions. The techniques you can use for factoring polynomials are pretty varied, but the most basic one is to factor out the greatest common factor, or GCF. Master this fundamental technique and you'll be dominating your exams. Finding the GCF of big numbers is pretty easy at this point. You just look for the biggest factor between two numbers. But several students told me before that they get confused when it's time to find the GCF of polynomials. I mean, how are you supposed to find the greatest common factor from this gibberish-looking combination of numbers and letters, right? Nah. You actually don't have to worry because I'll make the concept simpler for you. The greatest common factor of polynomials is actually just the product of the greatest common constant and the greatest common variable or variables. Take a look at this example. The greatest integer that divides evenly into 7, -35, and 14 is 7. And the greatest variable that is common to all three terms is x squared. The GCF is just 7 times x squared, or 7x squared. Pretty simple if you break it down like that, right? And that's pretty much the gist of it, so on we go! There will be a 3-second countdown before I start solving each problem. You can pause the video to solve it on your own first, and then continue playing the video to see if you're correct. Alright, let's start to factor out the greatest common factor in various polynomial expressions. You can find the greatest common constant by factoring the coefficients 13, 26, and 52. In this case, that constant is 13. You can find the greatest common variable by factoring the variables in each term. In this case, that is y cubed. Multiply the greatest common constant and the greatest common variable so that you find the greatest common factor, or GCF, which is 13y cubed. Use the distributive property to factor out 13y cubed from each term. And the final answer is 13y cubed times y squared minus 2y plus 4. Don't forget to check your answer by expanding it using polynomial multiplication as shown in this video. You can find the greatest common constant by factoring the coefficients 8, 36, and 20. In this case, that constant is 4. You can find the greatest common variable by factoring the variables in each term. In this case, that is x squared. Multiply the greatest common constant and the greatest common variable so that you find the greatest common factor, or GCF, which is 4x squared. Use the distributive property to factor out 4x squared from each term. And the final answer is 4x squared times 2x raised to 4 minus 8x squared plus 5. Don't forget to check your answer by expanding it using polynomial multiplication as shown in this video. By the way, please support Teach Me Animated Math by liking this video. And if you're new to our channel, then click the subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you get notified whenever we upload new videos. Okay, let's continue. Now, interestingly, the greatest common factor is not limited to just constants and variables. In fact, you can also have polynomials, such as binomials, as the greatest common factor. And in this current example, we'll explore how to do that. Typically, when there is a factor of 1, we no longer write it for the sake of brevity or because we're just lazy. And because of this, beginners might miss that detail when factoring polynomials. So in this example, let's highlight that factor of 1 for the second term. We now proceed to the next step, which is to identify the common binomial factor. In this case, that is 2z minus 5. Next step is to use the distributive property to factor out the common binomial factor, which is 2z minus 5. And the final answer is 2z minus 5 times 3z plus 1. Don't forget to check your answer by expanding it using polynomial multiplication as shown in this video. This problem will be a lot similar to the last one. Explicitly write that there is a factor of 1 for the second term. Identify the common binomial factor, which in this case is b plus 7. Use the distributive property to factor out the common binomial factor, which is b plus 7. And the final answer is b plus 7 times 6b plus 1. Don't forget to check your answer by expanding it using polynomial multiplication as shown in this video. You can find the greatest common constant by factoring the coefficients 6, 24, and 12. In this case, that constant is 6. You can find the greatest common variable by factoring the variables in each term. In this case, that is x squared. Multiply the greatest common constant and the greatest common variable so that you find the greatest common factor, or GCF, which is 6x squared. Use the distributive property to factor out 6x squared from each term. The answer is 6x squared times negative x raised to 5 plus 4x cubed plus 2. But wait! Sometimes, you might want to factor out the negative sign so that the leading coefficient of the highest degree term is positive. This would make the factored form negative 6x squared times x raised to 5 minus 4x cubed minus 2. Now, practically speaking, any of these two answers are correct, unless your exam gave some sort of specific instruction that the leading coefficient should be positive or something like that. Don't forget to check your answers by expanding them using polynomial multiplication, as shown in this video. And here is the answer key for this worksheet. I hope you learned a lot about how to factor out the greatest common factor in various polynomial expressions. Just practice finding the GCF of various polynomials. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, since correcting them is part of your learning process. Our next solve-along worksheet video is about factoring polynomials by grouping. This factoring technique is a step above the GCF method. But don't worry, because it will have step-by-step solutions that are very easy to follow. So be sure to subscribe to teach me animated math. And don't miss out. See you next time.